Auntie Joe, hello, it's Maya Grace in case you don't know, and today I'm gonna rant just a little bit. The goth scene is understood to be a matriarch that welcomes all genders with open arms. So why do the worst men feel comfortable here? There are honestly a disturbing number of abusive men in the goth scene, and not just in like the cliche DV kind of way, although at least everyone I know knows at least one woman or is one woman who's had a DV situation from their alternative boyfriend. But there's also just a lot of like obnoxious and disappointing like verbal and emotional abuse things going on. One of like the best predecessors of that kind of behavior is, you know, people feeling comfortable having like really awful violent opinions, like that they should be allowed to use racial slurs just for shock value because like it's their free speech and that deserves to be protected, which like I'm all for free speech, but I'm also all for responding to free speech in a free way. I've also run into like a disturbingly high number of transphobic men in goth spaces, and I don't fully understand what's going on with all of this. I mean, goth is built on this foundation of fighting tooth and nail to make sure that all of the weirdos feel loved and accepted regardless of race, sexuality, disability, or what have you. And bigots are still out here trying to claim all identities. This issue, as far as I can see it from my cozy armchair, is twofold. First off, we have counterculture for counterculture's sake. Like I said, people might be doing things for shock value and not really understanding like the depth of what they're doing. This is also a scene that attracts a very young crowd, and I think it's reasonable to expect people to grow. The other side of this, what I think is the larger side of this, I would like to call the MoJo DoJo Casa house phenomenon. Not because I think it's necessarily a direct one-to-one to the Barbie movie, but because it's really fun to say MoJo DoJo Casa house, and this is a depressing topic, so I need something that will make me smile. The goth space is not just built by women for women, it's always been about egalitarianism. Our four goths wanted us to have genuine equality regardless of your identity. It's always been a safe space. You might not have had the language back in the 1980s to explain that you were gender fluid or pansexual or some of the more nuanced terms that are used today, but you could dress and present yourself how you wanted and you could still be accepted. You could also love who you wanted and be loved and respected the whole way through, as anyone should be. Before the terminology was there, the respect was there. It's not like respect for LGBTQIA people was an afterthought. They were right there building the scene along with everybody else on equal ground. So, of course, this is a liberating space for women. It's a safe place to be feminine and have that be connotated with strength and power and good things. You'll still be given respect and be given protection whenever you need it. Like when you're at a concert and a pit breaks out and the whole crowd like airlifts you out of there and gets you to a safe space. I have had that experience many a times. I can't always tell when the blender's gonna start. Whenever it's time to leave the venue and everyone gets walked to their car or driven to their car where it's parked so that no one walks alone. And that kind of happens regardless of gender because sometimes men in a fancy outfit also need to be walked to their car because, you know, criminals don't discriminate. And the other massively liberating facet of alt spaces is the desexualization of the female form. You can just kind of exist without context in the goth space and people aren't going to do weird things about your body for the most part. I mean, like there are people that are there with bad intentions, of course, that's what we're talking about. And sometimes I think that there is a very heavy fetishization of that liberation, which is deeply upsetting, but that's a little bit too nuanced to get into right now, so we're going to mostly put a cap on that. But if we oversimplify the experience in the goth space based on gender and we picture it like a big old scale, as women come up to have an equal experience, men are kind of brought down to equality with everyone, and in that process they're going to let go of some things that they've begun to feel entitled to, like expecting all of the women around them to do free emotional labor so they don't have to learn how to actually use their mouth words to communicate their emotions. Or expecting people to dote on them and hang on their every word as if everything they're saying is really profound and original, even though they're just quoting a Joker meme from Instagram. Yeah, I do understand that that does feel like a loss. A ton of people much smarter than me have explained this exact sensation. It kind of feels like oppression to let go of a power or a privilege that you never should have had in the first place. Ken certainly didn't think equality looked very nice compared to patriarchy, but he also thought patriarchy was about horses, so that might not be super relevant here. The reason why I'm making this video is because I've had a couple of experiences that really made this click for me, and one of them in particular I'm gonna regurgitate to you now. I was at an alternative bar specifically for a goth night, and I had this guy explain to me that he didn't feel at home in the goth scene because he knew that no one agreed with his fundamental beliefs. No one was being unwelcoming to him. He just knew that they didn't agree with him. That's important to note. He happily told me all about how he thought that gay people and trans people were in fact like evil, like groomers after your children. And he told me that Tim Pool is his favorite place to get his information from because it's just such a knowledgeable and non-biased source. But I found this interaction with this man particularly disturbing because he understood his views were not like acceptable. He understood that I would not want to interact with someone who had those views. And he knew that it was objectively wrong to lie about it because he was like vaguely apologetic. And when I wasn't receptive to it, he tried to backpedal and change the conversation because, you know, I shouldn't be expected to talk about something like politics, which was incredibly condescending. But really what this guy wanted was he wanted a goth girlfriend. He said this multiple times, that he was just looking for a goth girlfriend. He himself was dressed in like a goth in the box outfit. Like he very clearly went to Hot Topic and dropped some money. He also listened to a lot of bands that I listen to. I'm not going to gatekeep and say that, you know, in some cultural way, this guy wasn't engaging in the scene because he was. He had paid money to be there just the same as everyone else. He was dressed just as nice as everyone else there. The issue and the thing that I'm gatekeeping on was that he didn't have fundamental respect for his fellow man. That's an issue. I also think it's fascinating that this man waited to tell me all of his secret, deep-held fundamental beliefs that were so important he couldn't feel at home in the goth scene until after he had been talking to me for 10 minutes, gotten me to laugh a couple of times, after he had bought me a drink, and after he had started to tell me like very personal things about himself that I wasn't immediately like non-receptive to. So he had tested the waters for some time before he started to let this slip. I went over this story with some of my friends who are also obviously in alt spaces, and every single one of them had similar stories. The cottagecore girlies have people assuming that they're going to be trad wives. The Lolita girlies have people assuming that they're going to be into DDLG. And the goth girlies have people assuming that if they date them, it's going to be like having a dame that they don't have to pay. That might have been too mean to say out loud, but it's true. But the thing that I've noticed with all of the stories that my friends gave me is that these men have a pattern of waiting until they think you've imprinted like a baby duck, and then they start to peel back the layers a little bit and see what they can get away with. And some people are patient enough that they will wait years. These guys are methodical and they are after something. And it's so frustrating because like you'll take hold of your identity and your sexuality, who you are as a complete person, and a complete person who's perceived as femme at that. You'll unpack all of the shame that comes with being confident and comfortable in your body just for someone to find a brand new exciting way to sexualize you and make you feel gross all over again. And then you're back at square one, unpacking the weird shame that you feel. It's very disheartening to be stuck in that loop. But Maya, if you feel like you're stuck in a loop and feeling shame about your body, why don't you just wear more clothes? Well, you see, I would do that, except I've done that before, and people actually were more creepy to me Because as it turns out, people being creepy to you has almost nothing to do with what you're wearing. It probably has more to do with your confidence. And whenever I'm dressing myself with the explicit goal of not being perceived or harassed, I'm going to be very fearful, and people are going to pick up on that, and they're going to treat me kind of bad. So I don't do that anymore, because then I feel gross and I get harassed, and there's no benefit for anybody. So why bother? Just because you think someone looks good does not mean they are trying to look good for you. Creeps are going to creep regardless. And the worst part of it is, I can't even pretend like I think explaining to people how this behavior is harmful is going to do anything at this point. Because the people perpetrating this behavior, they're so far gone, they're not even going to listen to me. And the best, statistically safest thing for me to do is to stay very far away from anyone who sees me as a walking, talking pair of bazongas, or whatever part of my body they've decided to look at. But how does this connect to the MoJo DoJo Casa house phenomenon? The idea that tolerating an intolerant group of people is going to create an intolerant group is not a new concept. And the MoJo DoJo Casa house itself is an exaggerated, cartoony example of this that I think illustrates it really well. If you let someone try out a fresh new idea and change a group to accommodate themselves more, but what they're asking to be accommodated is their own hateful ideas, you're just introducing intolerance to your group. This is widespread. This is not new. Everyone knows this already. If whenever Ken had come back from the real world and said, hey, I want to try out this new thing, people had said, hey, buddy, I don't like how that's taking autonomy away from the people in our community with us that we care about. Let's back it up a little bit and maybe get some horses instead. The MoJo DoJo Casa house could have actually maybe been like a nice thing. Maybe they would have had fun with it instead. But that's not what happened. Everyone jumped on board and said, yeah, we're going to try this new thing. And it did not go well. It did not go well for anybody. Barbie lost her house. You actually see the goth community acting like an immune system. I would like to believe that if the Barbie house had been a goth club, Ken would have been told why what he wanted to do would not work and given a better alternative, because I have seen people redirected in very gentle and loving ways in the goth scene, and I've also seen people who were not worth that energy just simply bounced, because that's what bouncers are for. That's not gatekeeping, that's sanity. And yes, obviously, all men are not the problem, and I'm not calling to ban men from goth or alt spaces by any means. I don't even dislike men personally, which borders on masochism. If I said the same thing about anything else that was statistically this likely to bring me direct harm, I would be clinically insane. I'm not going to try to break down the phenomenon of not all men, but you have to act like it's all men or else you're unsafe, because people much smarter than me have already explained it in various different ways, but I'll take a stab at it for shigs and giggles. Not all electrical wires are live, so why don't you bust through some drywall and start chewing on wires and see what happens? To that point, not every large body of water has a riptide, but do you know what you're going to find planted on the shore of every large body of water with public access? A little sign explaining what a riptide is and what to do if you're caught in one. Swim to the side, by the way, in case you didn't know. You swim to the side and then to shore because the current is stronger than you. You're welcome. From my experience, if this concept offends you, you're part of the problem. And if you don't think that you are, I don't think I want to talk to you. And you do have a right to free speech, and I believe in the right to free speech. I would like everyone to utilize it. So I know who to walk the heck away from. Free speech does not mean free access to platforming. Free speech does not mean equal respect. Free speech does not mean that you are guaranteed an audience. You can stand up on a soapbox, say whatever you want, and people can walk away. Shout out all the people who clicked away from this video in the first 3 minutes. But do you remember how I said this problem was twofold? Do you also remember how I said that it feels a little bit like oppression to be invited to a place of equality if you're used to having privileges you shouldn't? Do you also remember how I said that fighting oppression is like a huge tenet of the goth movement and also the punk movement and like every movement inside the alt umbrella? Yeah, I think some people get that real confused. And to be fair, it must feel confusing. I don't know. I'm not a man. I've never experienced life as a man. But if you're trying to find someone to rebel against and blame for your problems, the person who's asserting their right to exist normally and not be harassed is probably target-shaped. Whether it's a femme who does not want to be asked by the 10th person that night if they have an OnlyFans, or it's a trans kid who does not want to be at the center of yet another conspiracy theory. Kid you not, I have had more than 5 mediocre men explain to me at a goth night that they think trans people are the thing that goes bump in the nights, and they expected me to be relieved and happy to be able to like share this unique perspective on the world with them. No one thinks that. The only people who think that are jerks, and I don't want to associate with jerks, regardless of what bands they listen to. But I think the largest issue at play here, if you advertise your space as a safe space specifically for vulnerable women, some people are going to hear that message and their ears are just going to perk up at the words vulnerable women. The reason that abuse is so common in fashion communities that market themselves as safe spaces for vulnerable women is because abusers see that advertisement too. Lolita is an extreme example of this and a subculture inside of that alt umbrella. On Tumblr, every Lolita blogger that I run across has a banner somewhere on their blog basically begging people in kink spaces not to interact with them. No one works harder than the block button on a Lolita's account. And like that's the really frustrating thing about like having an account where you want to talk about your cool fashion with the world is that everyone is trying to just slide into your DMs with like weird, gross things they want to try to talk to you about, or they want to ask about your OnlyFans, or they want to use some tired line about how they're in love with an emo girl. A pox upon Machine Gun Kelly for giving creeps a soundtrack to harass Hot Topic employees too. I hate that song. But as I said before, abuse is so common in these communities because whenever you advertise yourself as a safe space for vulnerable women, people with the intent to abuse are just going to have their ears perk up at the words vulnerable women, and no other details are going to matter. When you put a message out into the general public, you can't control who sees it. And doing things like asking people to name 5 bands doesn't actually keep creeps from getting in. It just makes you look unapproachable and intimidating. You can't control who is going to show up and what they're going to try to do, but you can control your reaction to what you see them doing. Quoth the prophet Third Eye Blind, it is their turn to be scared of us. Personally, I am 100% willing to make an idiot of myself in the pursuit of a stranger's safety. I will bring down the people's elbow in a bar. Try me. That's all I had to say. If you're looking for goth sewing patterns, I have some really great ones on the way. Next week, I will be doing a public release that's going to be more in the EGL vein, but I've got great things on the way. And if there's anything that you'd like specifically to see, you can let me know down in the comments, whether that be a sewing pattern or a video topic you'd like to see me cover. As always, my Ko-fi is linked in the description box below. That is where you can download my free PDF sewing patterns, and that is also where you can buy me a Ko-fi so that I can pay for health insurance. Yay, health insurance! Anyways, that's all from me, and I'll see you next time. Quoth the prophet. He is Legend needs to perform that cover more because I love that cover and I've never heard it live, and I don't think they perform it live anymore, and that's really upsetting because Skylar Croom is so beautiful. Do you know who would never treat women badly? Skylar Croom. I guarantee it, because that man is beautiful and I love him. I mean, I don't love him. He's married. I respectfully respect him in a totally respectful way. And I've never looked at his beautiful hair and almost cried. That's never happened. Wrap yourself in foil to keep the flesh from spoil, but still the flies lay their eggs. These to explain that you were gender sexual. They want a big titty cartoon with the cutesy kind of mental illness that they could bring a tiny spooky treat and emotionally neglect and still be worshipped by at the end of the day. I still want to call this MoJo DoJo Casa house phenomenon, though.